is and I'll pass it around.
I will. So I just want to welcome everyone. Oh, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So I just want to welcome everybody to Lewiston, the second biggest city in the state, but the city with the biggest heart. And we are here for a budget workshop.
Yes, we are.
Oh, sorry, Heather, before you start.
Yep.
There's a card coming around. So was it last week, maybe the week before, Secretary Carson was in town with Senator Collins, and a local family opened their home up to discuss childhood lead poisoning prevention. And they had lead in their home. So it's a thank you card to them for doing so. If everyone could sign it, that'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. The first thing on the agenda tonight is talking about municipal revenues. That starts on page 13. And again, these are municipal revenues, non-tax revenues that we'll start with. The first one is at the bottom of the page. The other tax and interest includes excise tax, interest, and so forth. We have an overall increase here of $112,500. Motor vehicle excise tax continues to grow. We're looking at $110,000 this year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed with that because at some point we're going to hit the cliff. And before we were seeing both the value and the count increase. Now it's just the value, which means at some point those values decrease every year. So excise tax should be scaling back, but we are still outpacing, even last year. So I'm relatively comfortable with this increase. We'll kind of keep posted on that, and if we need to do something next year, if things are not looking like it's keeping pace with what's budgeted, we'll make adjustments at that point in time. As far as interest on taxes, that grew by $2,500. I will note the state increased the interest that we are allowed to charge. Typically, the city of Lewiston charges the maximum interest allowed by the state, and for a number of years that was at 7%. They've increased that to 9%, and that's typically a rate that like I've said, we've adopted the state maximum. The next category that you'll see with revenues starts on at the bottom of page 13 and continues on page 14 is licensing and permits. We have an overall increase here of $12,200 or 3.3. We have small fluctuations in several categories, but clearly the building inspections, those things related to building improvements are the areas that we saw the increases. So building inspection increased by $5,000. We did have about a $1,500 increase in restaurant licensing. Electrical permits was just shy of $5,000, and then the other license and permits at $2,000, and plumbing at $3,000. All showed notable increases. We did have an offset to a reduction in garage sale permits. Either people are just not holding garage sales or they're doing everything via Craigslist and eBay and everything else. And then we had a decline in excavation permits of $2,500. The intergovernmental revenues fall on the bottom of page 14 and the totals on the top of page 15. We have an overall increase here of $137,281 or 3.2%. And essentially all of that is in general assistance. That shrank by $268,139. As a reminder, the state reimburses 70% of the eligible costs, so when the costs decrease, obviously the revenue from the state will have that corresponding decrease. When we first discussed this, I believe it was when the city administrator did his memo, Councilor Lyson asked for some statistics on the general assistance. You should have all received those in your packet, showing the drastic drop in what we've been seeing, not only in clients, but as far as vouchers issued and so forth. So we have that, as well as The highway funds and the Auburn-Lewiston airport tax also declined. Highway revenues was a smaller amount by $2,600. The airport tax is about $21,000. That's the sphere of influence. That's based upon the value around the airport. And that clearly, it actually shrank this year, so we are going to have a revenue shortfall in this particular account this year, and we're budgeting for it more accurately next year.
One quick comment on revenue sharing. We budgeted based on 2%. The governor is proposing 2.5%. So we have not included that additional 0.5%, which is roughly $720,000. So the interesting thing there, of course, is we probably will adopt our budget before the state adopts theirs. So my proposal would be that we include language in our budget adoption that simply indicates that all of those funds would go toward reducing the property tax levy. I think Jim had a question. Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, no. So what's the timing differential, you think? The state-
We adopt our budget in early May, and we have to adopt it by the end of May. The state, you never can tell for sure when the state's going to adopt its budget. Sometimes I remember one time it was very early in the process because they wanted to do it before the 2/3 requirement kicked in.
That is not the case this year.
That's not going to happen. I didn't think it would happen this year. It has, I think, more traditionally been in June.
So I'm thinking that it's not going to be certainly less than 2.5%.
I would hope not.
I mean, I would find that to be very strange.
I would,
When you've
yes.
got legislatures that's leaning in that direction and want more, but the governor only doing 2.5, she has the
well,
ability to.
part of the legislature
Yeah.
wants more.
Yes.
So.
I think the majority of the legislature wants more. Well, I would say, okay, more, but at least the 2.5.
So to give you a sense, we just submitted a letter from the Taxation Committee to the governor regarding the budget, where it was pretty much split on party lines that we wanted to see. So it was like 6-3 vote. 6 of us wanted to see revenue sharing increase to the full 5%. The other 3 were not willing to sign on to that piece of the letter. So I think that everybody wants to see an increase. I don't know what the degree of that increase will be.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, I'd rather have that in our pocket for doing other stuff too, rather than just, maybe a portion of that reduction. Because we're just like the state is, we're trying to catch up from cuts that we've had to make because of the lack of revenue sharing. So
If there's some interest in that, I still would recommend that that be done below the budget. In other words, we adopt a budget, and then we can have language in our appropriation resolve that would direct any additional revenue sharing.
yeah,
Y
I
and
just
Z.
don't want to limit it to tax reduction. I think a portion of it
Right.
should go there.
Right.
But I think, relative to, our 30-some% decrease in staffing, I think we need to begin to build up staff again, and we're doing that.
One of the things we can start doing when we show you the summary sheet is we can build in the 750 below the line. So we can show you what the tax rate is based on the budget as it stands, and we can show the 750 and what the tax rate would be if we received that.
I mean, I think that
And
we
it's
should,
about a 30-some cent difference.
we should build our budget based upon knowing exactly what we're going to have, which is the 2%.
That's certainly
I
my
think that we have the list of things that we're looking at, that we can figure out what that additional 0.5% would be, and we can figure out which things we may or may not want to fund. I mean, there may also be people on this council who do want it to go directly to property tax relief.
Only,
And I
yeah.
feel like that's probably a conversation we should have once
Yes.
we get through this initial process.
I would agree with that.
I agree with that, too. Thank you.
But I just want to stress, having once or twice actually once in my career, put revenues into a budget that didn't show up, I got burned by it. I'm very cautious of doing that.
I'm certain that Heather does not think that.
That was not when I was here, not when I was here, no. And I just, even if we're proposing fee increases in the budget, I want you to adopt the fee increase before we adopt the budget, because I don't want to have a hole in the budget if something happens later and you decide not to proceed.
Another question? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think you just said it, but the translation of that 0.5% would be what, 30 cents?
Roughly, it's in the budget memo.
Because although I'd support the tax reduction, I'd probably have a different manner as to how to approach that than the way that you proposed.
I don't remember where I put it.
I know, that's what I'm like, here, revenue sharing, 725.
725, which converts in, did I say what it converted into? How many cents?
Oh,
On the
yes.
property tax?
I thought you did, but no.
I'll look under the tax rate part.
Would it be 36?
Yeah.
36 cents?
Yeah,
I think
somewhere
that's
around
from
there.
81, 45.
I didn't bring my cheaters either, so.
You want my glasses?
We'll produce a sheet
Yeah.
for the next meeting.
That would be
That's
great.
easier.
Thank you. Counselor Lyson?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the general assistance aid. So, and Wendy, you're here. You know, that's a kind of a dramatic cut, but it's based upon what we anticipate the expenses to be.
Have we gotten there yet?
No,
Well,
we haven't gotten
it's-
to that.
We'll be discussing that whole budget tonight.
Okay,
So,
but that line item is here, right?
that- on the revenue
But-
side, but
but
it
it-
reflects the expenditure side.
Disbursement
Yeah.
from the, right.
Okay, so we'll,
I'll revisit it again when we get to the expenditure side.
because you know, I think this is a cause to celebrate to a certain extent, you know, and also to kind of respond to a narrative that's always like, you know, how much general assistance is, yeah, on and on and on and on. That's a narrative that we've talked about as well. so.
We can talk about that later,
Okay,
but
thank you.
Yep. So the last kind of couple tidbits under the intergovernmental is we are predicting, even without the 2.5%, we are predicting state revenue sharing to increase by $150,000 based upon what we're seeing and collecting so far this year. The only other thing that falls in there is we have the Lewiston Housing Authority. They reimburse us what essentially is a pilot property tax, or payment in lieu of taxes. And it's based upon a formula they use for their utility costs, rental, fuel, oil, and so forth. So we anticipate an additional $4,000 coming in from the Housing Authority. Charges for service fall on, or start on page 15 and continue to the very top of page 16. We have an overall decrease here of $18,140. Again, we have a lot of small offsetting fluctuations. For example, the increase in parking meters, $4,000, canceled the reduction in vital statistics and burial permits. The overall anticipated net increase for daily parking was about $10,150, and that tempers the decrease in participation in the property or apartment trash building program of about $29,000. Clearly, that's the biggest cost driver in the decrease in revenue in this category is the just shy of $30,000 in that apartment. That's the landlords that pay for trash pickup is what that program is. And we are seeing, you know, slowly each year that people are on the program, that participation in that program has decreased. Fines and forfeiture. First, start at the top of page 16.
I just thought of something different. Sorry.
We have an overall increase here of just shy of $18,000, and it all falls in our public safety, police, fire, court fines, and false alarms. The combination rose by $10,500. Parking violations rose by about $8,700. Which all temper the reduction in library fines and fees of about $1,200. Interest and rents is at the bottom of page 16. We have an overall increase here of $33,300 or 2.2%. We are seeing interest rates, you know, where it's bad for the bond market, it's great for the CD investment market. So we are seeing the increase in rates here, anticipating that rising by about $35,000. We have a $5,400 increase in franchise fees, and the total monthly parking in all the parking garage rose by $47,000. Lincoln Street clearly is the shining star leading that bump in the increase. And as a reminder, we've talked about it on a number of occasions, the decrease in the Violations Bureau, the rental income is about $55,000 impact on this budget.
And also be aware that the FCC is considering eliminating franchise fees on cable
Yes.
service.
The miscellaneous revenue had an overall increase of $5,300, and it's all projected in the sale of surplus property. We've got another list that will be brought before you on various parcels that we are looking at putting out for bid, as well as, you know, the sale of surplus property that we get from Municipal Garage and likewise. So if there are no other questions on the revenue, we can jump to the social services or the general assistance budget. That starts on page 66. And Wendy, if you want to come up. So there's a couple of highlights before we get down into the detail of the social service budget. We have an overall increase or decrease here, as we've talked about, of about $391,000. Or almost 32%. And as a reminder that we talked about in code enforcement, likewise here in the social service office, this is our final year to fund one of the caseworkers. It's in year 5 of the 5 years. So next year's budget, we will be looking at bringing that back onto the tax base.
Can you remind us of the amount?
Yes. I think it's about $54,000 total with $58,500. The social service administration portion of that, which is the top portion of that, had an overall decrease of $8,300 or 2.9%. That was all on salaries through attrition in the director's position and some of the other positions as well. Contractual services shrank by about $129. Decreases in the support for the GA software licensing agreement were reduced by $200, and the telephone line by about $350, which offset the increase in repairs to equipment and then staff travel. So again, overall, minor fluctuations when you're looking at the budget as a whole. Supplies rose by about $200 and pretty equally spread between the printing and the office supplies based upon current consumption. And the fixed charges were flat. The actual social service client benefit side of the program had the big decrease, that $383,000 or 41%. And again, to council license point, the state reimburses 70% of that budget. So the overall impact on this budget on the tax rate with that reimbursement is $166,800, which is much less than it has been, you know, in a number of years. And based upon the statistics both Wendy's office produced and as seen, and what we're seeing running through the financial statements from a reimbursement. So we are looking at, under that contractual service piece, increasing by $1,545. It's all in the increase in burial service. That's probably the one budgetary line item that we're seeing estimates increase. That was offset by reductions in utilities of about $2,600 and fuel of about $500. Supplies, which is pretty much all food, and then you do have a smaller amount in medical, decreased by $35,000, food being the biggest piece at 33. And then your fixed charges, which is your rent reimbursement, that's probably the biggest impact there. That had an overall decrease of $349,600. And then we had a small new category for temporary housing that the state's asked us to track separately, so that had a $400 estimate that may or may not, since it's the first year that we're tracking it, we'll be better able to budget in following years.
Counselor Lyson?
Yeah, I know I'm an easy target, you can confuse me pretty easily, but why are we talking general assistance and then social service? What's the why is the name different?
The state still calls it general assistance. However, the city, I think it was 2 years ago, the director at the time kind of wanted it a more friendly sounding title, so
it's
she
called-
elected.
Your department is what? It's social service?
Social services,
Department.
yes.
General Assistance Division.
Okay, it's general assistance is division, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Like I said, easily confused, but I'll work with it.
Any other questions?
Going to look at the detail.
If you have questions, I'm sure Wendy would be able to answer. Otherwise, that was more informational because the council requested it. It kind of just supports the major reduction in the budget. It adds the traffic through the office and so forth to kind of substantiate what we're seeing and what we're requesting in the budget.
And what you see, I mean, I just saw the most recent report, I think. Last month, we only saw 3 asylees, immigrants, refugees.
There were 6 cases, yes,
It's-
new intake cases that we had in for March. February was, I believe it was 12, and then January was 16, so it's a progressive decline that's happening there.
And if you look at the chart, you can see how dramatically that's fallen from, say, 2016, 2017, when there were 800 some asylum cases. So we're seeing a dramatic reduction. We're also seeing that a much higher percentage of the benefit that we provide goes to non-immigrant refugee asylees than has been the case in recent months, to where it's 90-some%. Now goes to non-immigrants, refugees, asylees.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome, thank you.
So the next area to discuss is the library budget. It falls on page 72 and 73.
And you all have to be very nice tonight. because
Marcella's back
we
with
brought
us.
Marcella back off of maternity leave, so.
Although she said something about being happy about talking to adults.
I'm there.
So, the library had an overall increase of $44,688, or 4.4%. There was a new position requested as part of the new program and services. A library technician for the reference area has a value of $31,000. Just as a reminder, at the end of the budget workshop tonight, I will be passing out the consolidated list that we'll be discussing on Thursday of all of the new positions that are in the budget and the ones that aren't in the budget.
And this one is not in the budget, correct?
It is currently not in the budget, that's correct. So library administration had an overall increase of just shy of $1,600, or 1.2%. We had personal services that rose by $3,600, and it was offset by a decrease in contractual service of about $1,200. That includes repairs to equipment of $1,400. Normally, they pay for a maintenance agreement on the book theft system. That is at the end of its life, so we have budgeted that as part of the fund balance purchasing, so we don't need to budget the maintenance and licensing for this year. It will come back in the budget the following year. And then we had a small increase in postage. Supplies decreased by $825, both in office supplies based upon historical usage, and fixed charges were flat. The lending services division have an overall increase of $28,000, or 5.4%, and essentially all of that is in personal services. That rose by $28,200. We had the normal COLA and step increases, not only for your full-time positions, but the temporary wages also has a similar pay scale adjustment, and also was impacted by the minimum wage increase. So the temporary wages increased by about $10,300 there. The contractual service line items were flat, and we had a small decrease in supplies in the reference book budget by $160, nothing too substantial. The collection division, which is the division on the top of page 73, had an overall decrease of about $1,800, or 1%. The increase that we saw in personal services of about $1,700 includes a mixture of both regular wages and temporary wages, was offset by the $2,400 decrease in contractual. That's at the maintenance and licensing due to our share of the Minerva consortium. We no longer need to pay for that, is that correct, Marcella?
No, it just decreased.
Okay, the amount decreased based upon that. And then supplies also shrank by about $1,100 in the office supplies account. And then the library building, which is the last component, had an overall increase here of $16,850, or 9.6%. The cross-charging of public works into the building maintenance piece declined by about $2,100. All of the increase was found in the contractual service line items. That totaled about $19,350 or so, which included increases in utilities, cleaning, outside rental, which is that snow removal component that we've been experiencing all along, and repairs to buildings for about $7,100. We're including the HVAC preventive maintenance contract that we've seen in the other buildings this year, as well as a pest management and some roof inspections based upon what we've seen for repairs and needs up to that point. And then we had a small decrease of $350 in household supplies based upon consumption.
Could you just explain the temporary wages within lending services? It seems like there's quite a volume of that. I'm just curious what that's related to.
Sure, so that's the department that has the least number of full-time staff. So in general, it has most hours of part-time, and it was heavily affected by the minimum wage increase.
Okay.
Because what happened is the next level position was almost overlapping with the minimum wage, and so since we asked more of them, we did increase that a bit, and that bumped up another set of positions.
Okay, so we're calling part-time force
Temporary, yes.
temporary wages. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Counselor, those are usually employees that work regularly under 20 hours a week,
Okay.
is how we define them.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions about the library? Thank you for joining us. Debt service is the next category to talk about on page 74. We have an overall increase here of
77,
74.
74?
Keep going, you're on the wrong
Says
page.
77 there.
Well, I didn't, I realized that, that's why I
Oh,
looked
you
over it.
fixed it, okay.
Anyway,
Two.
so we have an overall increase here of $584,841, or 7.2%. We had principal that rose by $719,000. That's based upon the FY18 LCIP coming online. You might remember last year, as part of the whole double budget deliberations, we had doubled up on the debt service because capturing 2 bond sales in 1 fiscal year. And the council elected to postpone the first principal payment until this fiscal year to avoid that huge jump last year. So now we are kind of seeing the result of that. Exactly. So we also had an increase in interest of $165,343. Again, that includes the FY18 that was programmed, and only interest only for the FY19 LCIP. We have not sold LCIP, the FY19's LCIP. There is the opportunity, I know Ed and I keep bouncing it around a little bit, and when we talk more in the general discussions about where council kind of wants to see where the tax rate is, there is some savings if I decide to delay the sale of that bond. There will be some interest savings. What we're seeing is initially we were doing it right out of the gate, first thing, you know, after the budget was adopted, essentially. But now we're seeing the Federal Reserve is kind of scaling back on the interest rate nudges that they were planning on doing. So we may be able to buy some time and push that sale a little later. But we're still kind of
Considering.
that. So one thing, because debt service has been a discussion for a very, very long time in the city of Lewiston, not only from the rating agency standpoint, but the council standpoint, both this council and prior councils. This is kind of my opportunity to kind of remind you where we were and where we are now. Kind of the trends that we are seeing with debt service, and I think it's critically important as we're starting to take on, you know, fire substations and things like that, to remind how much work has happened to allow us to afford now these building improvements that if we hadn't gone that route, we would have been in a much different situation. So if you will humor me, I will talk about the limitation was approved by council. The 80% limitation was approved by council in the first one, the 97% in 2009. We updated it to the 80% limit in 2011. There's only been 2 instances since that time period where the council has approved LCIPs above the budget limitation. The first one was when the Lewiston Middle School had the expansion, and that went to public referendum and passed. And then FY19's LCIP was the second time. In a 5-year period, or in the next 5 years, we are planning on paying off 58% of our debt. So even though we talk about this, and I know Councilor Marcotte sees the large percentage of debt service on the budget, keeping those amortization schedules paid off at that high of rate is where we see the benefit right here. I mean, when you're looking at essentially 58% of our debt, from general fund in 5 years is gone. If we look at a 10-year period, we're talking 84% of our budget. That's what that lower interest rate market allowed us to do, is really ramp up the amortization schedules so we are paying those off much, much faster than we ever have been before. Our peak, I use FY 2005 as our peak kind of never want to go there again type thing. We eliminated $23.1 million, or 78% of our outstanding debt balance since then. Again, that's what that amortization schedule, that rapid payoff has allowed us to do. During that same period, and that was from overall debt service, the interest, or the principal portion, has been reduced by $30 million, or 42%. And the last 6 years, and particularly Madam Mayor has known how many times I've brought refunding orders to the council sometimes at the last minute, because we were able to save. In a 6-year time period, we saved $9.31 million in present value savings over a 6-year period of time doing that. So again, it's something that, Councilor Lyson talked about being proud of the general assistance budget. This is what I'm proud of. We knew this was an issue. We've slowly worked on this and eroded it, and I know there's still work to be done, but we really set the tone going forward, knowing some of the huge infrastructure improvements that we were going to need to make. So that's all I have to say about that service.
Thank you.
So, every once in a while, everybody here has to hear the good stuff. So intergovernmental, and I'm just as passionate when I talk to the rating agencies too, so. Intergovernmentals, we've already talked about the 911 committee. That was when the public safety discussion, we had all those divisions here. So we do have, as a reminder, the overall increase in intergovernmental agencies rose by $207,700, or just shy of 5%. The airport, I know the airport director's here. Rick, if you want to come up and visit with us.
It's coming.
The airport had an overall increase of $19,000, or 11%. I will remind you, I believe it was in the, at least some of the discussion in the administrator's presentation. In the budget is $61,000 of carryover of surplus LCI, prior LCIP money. You might recall an order was placed before the council to have that surplus go to a compact tractor for sidewalk, and also do some blades and so forth for the new runway. The city of Lewiston approved that order to go ahead and use that, and the timing was such, we would have, or he would have got the tractor right before the winter season, but the city of Auburn decided to wait and do this during the budgetary process. So the committee, the airport board, had voted to carry that surplus as part of the budget, kind of like what the city of Auburn requested us to do, and show both the bringing forward of those surplus funds and the cost of that equipment in the budget as part of this budget presentation. So when we get to those line items, I'll show you where, or I'll highlight where that sidewalk plow is. The non-FBO revenues had a decrease of essentially $115,000. The lion's share of that reduction was in rental fees based upon the large hangar conversion to the Elite Airways when Lufthansa had moved out. We have small reductions in material extractions at Christian Hill of just about $9,700. Those were offset by increase in landing fees and fuel flowage fees related, and that shows just kind of the increase in activity that the airport has been experiencing, you know, particularly within this last year. That had an increase of about $6,700. That was all driven by people flying into the airport. So those are activity-based revenue. Personal services rose by just under $12,000. It does allow for some merit adjustments. Overtime is flat. We have a small decrease in fringe benefits of about $700, and that's based upon attrition and what the new employees have elected. They have the similar increases in health insurance and so forth that the city has been experiencing. They are all on the PPO 500 plan, just like the city as well. We did have an increase in professional development here of just under $5,100 based upon certification and licensing credentials that are needed both for the staff as well as the airport director. On the operational side of things, we're looking at an $11,550 or 16%. We noted reductions in utilities. We have replaced a lot of the lighting with LED lighting, so we're seeing a savings of just shy of $5,000 there, which tempered the increase in snow and ice supplies of about $16,000. Again, similar to the city where the average 3 years on the city side has gone up. we're seeing that in the airport as well. Maintenance rose by 54, or just shy of $54,000. The bulk of this is in the airfield of $5,200. That is where the compact tractor is budgeted, is that airfield area. We also are looking at some small increase due to replacing windsocks, directionals, and so forth, of about $2,000. We have some computer upgrades that we need to do for Microsoft for about $3,800. And then we have some reductions in vehicle and pavement maintenance to offset some of those increases. But the lion's share of that increase in the whole maintenance component is that sidewalk compactor. Administration had a decrease of $8,400 when Elite Airway came through and we brought the hangar amortization payment schedule back to council. That was renegotiated, so that saved $8,600 on the lease payment, or on the debt payment back to the two municipalities. We also have a small $2,700 savings in the audit fee, and that offset the increase in advertising of $3,000 and legal services of $5,000.
That's all right.
But you're saying $8,600, is it 86,000 for the hangar loan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just like, more money?
No, sorry. FBO operations, the fixed base operator.
Correct.
I'm every once in a while I get the acronym right the first time. So we have an overall increase here of about $163,000 or $64,000 or 24%. That is all in fuel sales, and not only with the price increase or price adjustments, but also with the sheer volume of fuel sales. So we get the double whammy that helped that line item. FBO expenditures also increase. If we are selling fuel, we must buy it to sell it. So you have that increase as well, with that of about $95,000. We do have an increase here in personal services of about $44,000 between salaries and fringe benefits. We have a position, a management position in the FBO that has been vacant for a number of months. That's salary is kind of being market driven to be able to find somebody with the proper credentialing, so we're having to increase that, and I know Rick is still having a little bit of a struggle getting that position filled, so we are reflecting that in the budget to more align with what we're going to have to pay that position. The last kind of big ticket item, or the last two in the FBO in the non-personnel services, includes ground support increase of just shy of $20,000. We are looking at a tug needed to move the larger aircraft associated with Elite Airways coming in. And then we have a $5,000 increase in materials and supplies based upon usage and what we are just seeing with the staffing models and so forth. And that was offset by a reduction of $8,800 in utilities, again with the LED conversions. Questions, comments? Get the highlights there. Okay, thank you, Rick.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the next intergovernmental revenue, or intergovernmental department to talk about is the transit subsidy. I'm not sure, is Marcia coming up with me?
Marcia's coming up.
I'm sure Dennis is back there somewhere. Hiding. Dennis is hiding. So the transit budget
Has everyone met Marcia Bennett?
okay. The transit had an overall budget increase of $23,756, or 9.3%. Notice there's kind of two things I want to highlight. First of all, the city is budgeting for our portion of the annual $50,000 bus replacement program through fund balance, just like we've done in a number of years in the past. Also, this budget in the city of Lewiston's budget assumes an existing service, not going back to full service. There was a new program and service request to kind of footnote, if the transit committee went back to full service, it would cost the city of Lewiston an additional $53,747.
So, Ed, I'm wondering if you can just give an overview of why, just sort of, because Auburn cut their service last year, how that plays into
Well,
what Lewiston's.
actually, Auburn made a unilateral reduction in their contribution to the transit system 2 budgets ago. And that was done pretty late in their budget process without a whole lot of discussion and I think perhaps not a full understanding of its impact. Because of that cut of $50,000, you also lose the federal match. So the actual impact was over $100,000. All of that reduction was covered through expense reductions related to reducing service in Auburn. So the service in Auburn was reduced primarily on the new Auburn run. Because that service was reduced and because we were contributing more, we got greater benefit from the federal contribution. So more of the federal subsidy was coming to Lewiston to offset our costs. If Auburn decides to go back to where they were, there are a couple of things that impact the reasons why ours go up. First, that federal subsidy is reallocated more equitably, where we were getting 60% of it, we go back to 50, just using close numbers. So that would obviously be part of the effect. The second impact, and this is more systemic and actually shows up in both parts of the budget here, is that we've lost some federal funding that was provided as an incentive to small rural transit systems. And it was based on a formula that nobody except the gods of FTA seem to understand. It looks at a number of factors about how your system's performing, and if it meets certain factors, you could get additional funding. In effect, it was an incentive for performance. And that was about $110,000, 119?
It was 189.
189.
In 2017, it's 261,000 this year for FY19.
And so we lost that. That was actually lost, that Auburn's decision to reduce service didn't create that loss,
Correct.
because the feds looked back effectively to the budget before the year Auburn cut it. So we missed it by a very small, what,
1/100th of a point.
100th of a point. So that's also affecting this budget. The complicating factor we're going to have as we proceed here is that I anticipate that we will be adopting our budget before the city of Auburn will be adopting theirs. So we will not necessarily know for sure whether Auburn's going to go back to fully restoring the service or not. I've certainly asked Peter Crichton to give me some preliminary indications once he's had a chance to discuss this with them, and I think they're scheduled for you
We
guys.
have a workshop on the 29th.
So the 29th, which is all of, basically a week and a few days before we are planning on adopting our budget. As we get closer to that point, there's a number of approaches we can take to try to address that. One of which is that we could do what we've done in other instances, which is provide the funding subject to, and if not, backing it out and taking it off the tax rate. That would probably be the simplest way to do it. But keep that in mind, that that's a little bit of a complication. So that is it. And we actually had the folks run a 5-year budget? Backwards from going through the entire period from when both cities were at the service level, the 50-50 split service level, to Auburn making the reduction for 2 years to going back to the full service. And all things being equal, if Auburn had funded 50% of the service for those other 2 years, we would still be where we're at now. We'd still be looking at that kind of an increase to go to support full service. And we actually would have had to pay, I think, some more
It would have been
We
more.
would have been subsidizing or paying more for the service in those years where Auburn cut theirs because we were getting the credit for the federal funds. I hope that explains it. This gets a little bit Byzantine, given the funding sources and the FTA's rules and regulations and how these things go, but I hope that tries to give you a context of why we're looking at both the, in part, the initial increase in the budget for current service, plus the additional increase if we go to, if full service is restored.
Thank you. Councilor Lyson?
Marcia, what, we've talked a little bit about ridership decline. I mean, what do you see some other reasons from the high of 16?
So before we get into that, do you have more like budget-related stuff?
I can even do it after the questions or before, so go ahead, Counselor Lyson.
It's, both systems are, both sides of the river are tied together. So even though there were cuts, like the service cuts were primarily on the Auburn side, it's one system. So it's inevitably gonna affect Lewiston residents, just not direct service in Lewiston. We had, there's quite a few people that, if you look at the New Auburn bus route itself, the ridership declined quite, it went down quite a bit because that route actually started in Lewiston and went into New Auburn. So it was, serving both cities.
Right.
So there's too many holes in the system to make it so it's a easy system to navigate. You have too long of a wait time, so it really discourages people. At this point, unfortunately, we're capturing those people that need it, not making it so it's a value to the city, so people want to take it.
So if New Auburn declined, some of those people would probably come over here and get on the Lisbon Street route potentially to go out to a job or something. So that has an effect through the whole system.
That was probably one of the higher complaints that I got, with people trying to get from New Auburn to Lewiston in order to continue on early mornings to employment.
And the downtown shuttle with that, with instituting that is now, there's a fee for that, right? It used to be,
Correct.
it says.
Correct.
That's almost like a 30% projection.
Yeah, that was a combination of, putting a fare on that probably reduced some of the ridership. But what the transit committee found was that a lot of the people that are riding the shuttle anyways already have a monthly pass. If you have a monthly pass, you don't have to, it's unlimited rides, or they're transferring. So it's just, people that just may be riding the bus just for something to do. So it was, we lost some. Are those real riders? It's hard to tell, but it just makes it so those people that do need the system have it available to them.
So some of the other highlights to the budget, she did have non-subsidy revenues increase by about $5,100. That was all in federal funding. Fare box revenue is anticipated to be flat at $205,000. Advertising as well, and it's at $20,000, and then we have vending sales at $700. Fixed route cost increased by about $39,000. That's attributed to the increase in the Western Main Transportation Operating Contract. Essentially, all of that increase is in there. We have a small increase in equipment maintenance of about $1,200, and that was offset by reduction in fuel. They fill up at the city of Lewiston, so when we locked in those very competitive rates, they got the benefit of the lock-in rate as well. Paratransit also increased by about just shy of $3,000, and that's all in the Western Main Transit contract as well. Bus station and administrative costs had an increase of $1,500, and that was a slight increase in janitorial services of $2,000, which was offset by supplies of $500. That's kind of the highlights there.
What's built into the budget is status quo.
Status quo is built in. So. other questions, comments?
And the difference between status quo and full service is about $250,000?
It would be an additional just shy of
Yeah.
$54,000 if
Right.
we go back to full
Sure,
service.
okay. And that's the Lewiston portion,
That's the Lewiston portion.
Yes, Auburn's portion is significantly more than that.
right,
the
because they
100 and-
had cut it down before that.
It's $100,000 plus, or that would be the increase that they're looking at. So I will just point out to you that you'll need to think about how you want to handle that. Do we want to make provisions for Auburn increasing back to full service? It's kind of an awkward situation where we're having to make some decisions early on that might influence their decisions. It'd be much better if they'd make their decision first, but I can't guarantee that that's going to happen.
I mean, I personally have heard more than anything else that transportation for people to get to jobs, to get to medical appointments is problematic. And I think we all heard from a service provider in the community who they're actually not recommending people use the bus service because they're having to wait hours to get the bus. They're not making it to their medical appointments on time. I was at an LATC meeting where there were plenty of, a lot of employers there who want increases to the bus service so they can get workers to jobs. So I am personally in favor of the going back to full service.
So we can put that on,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
We'll put that on, obviously, that's going to be an
The
item we'll
list.
come back and discuss further.
Counselor Beam?
I was just talking this afternoon with a person who had trouble getting to a medical appointment because of the long roundabout route that she had to go through. So it has been a hardship on Lewiston as well. And the only problem is Auburn hasn't done it.
Right.
And they keep saying they're going to, and they don't. And it just bothers me, it scares me to put money in that, I don't know, we can just take it out.
Yeah, again, it can be
Right.
structured in such a
Contingency.
way that if we approve the higher amount and they don't, we can just pull that back out of the expense budget and throw it against the tax rate.
Well, I think maybe it's a good idea to set a good example and hopefully get things going because our transportation system is
And-
just not meeting the needs.
And just so you all know, the Auburn city manager has put this money in their budget, so he is recommending it in their budget.
At full service?
Hmm?
At full service?
Yes.
At full service, he's recommending full service to his council.
Counselor Lyson?
Yes, Marcia, when's your workshop with the Auburn City Council?
April
29th.
29th.
Next.
I'm all set. Thank you, Marcia.
Thanks, Marcia.
The last intergovernmental budget to talk about is the county. The county had, stop it, I'll finish it. The county had it had an increase of $164,459, or 6.1%. Obviously, the fixed charges reflect the county budget increase. That's an additional 4 cents on the tax rate this year.
And as always, there is absolutely nothing we can do about that except pay it.
For abatement.
I don't think so.
Poverty abatement. There we go.
And again, the allocation for county government is based on a community's percentage of the total countywide assessed value. So Lewiston and Auburn together account for about half the county budget. And if we don't pay it, they can come, the state can come take your hot property and sell it. I
So,
don't think that's legal, but I would think that would be unconstitutional.
Actually, I think it's constitutional. May have been done like 200 years ago. Rare cases. But if we can direct which properties that they can take and payment.
so that's all of the topics we wanted to talk about tonight. I will let you know Thursday is kind of the final kind of department budget review session. So we will be reviewing not only the nonprofit requests, but also the miscellaneous budget. Most of the miscellaneous budget we've already covered the first night when we talked about fringe benefits, because a lot of the health insurance and retirement is in there. So, and then that would be the first opportunity to do kind of general discussions. I know one of the things the council had on their list is to review both the new positions that are in the budget and the ones that are requesting, so I'll pass out this detail tonight. It kind of aligns with what we talked about at the last council meeting. And then on Tuesday, are we starting at 5:30?
Well, I think we're going to start at 5:30. That was what our intention was, because that's the night that the formal school budget presentation is going to be made. And as you know, the school committee has had some discussions about items on that extra list that was in the budget booklet, and is recommending a number of those be included. So I would assume that there may be some questions from the council in regard to those add-ons that I think it's $300 and some $1,000 worth of additional funding that the school department's looking for.
And you sent us an email with that detail, correct?
Yes, although I think some of the numbers are not quite right.
There's only one that is $4,000 off. It's the health insurance line.
Okay, could we get an update?
Yeah.
An updated version of that?
Yeah.
And one of the things that one of the problems we ran into last year is that when we had the school budget presented to the council, there wasn't much feedback. And we had to then have a discussion at a subsequent meeting where we were looking for some guidance from the council as to what they were comfortable with. And I know the school department wasn't too happy that that got done without their participation, even though I don't think the end result was a problem for them. So I would urge all of you to certainly ask questions and discuss these items with the superintendent, whoever from the school committee is here. But it's helpful for us to get a reading fairly early, because if you are uncomfortable with anything that they're suggesting be funded, you need to give them some guidance that they can go back on. Because again, even though we may be discussing those additional items, you might say you want to cut item 3 on the list, and they don't have to do that. They can find the money elsewhere in their budget. They can make those adjustments wherever, as long as they stay within the overall allocation.
Council Ray?
So a notice went out today from the school department that that meeting is at 6 p.m. Is there another item that will be handled from 5:30 to 6?
We had also talked about having an update that night on the LCIP from the school department. Let me talk to the school superintendent. I sent him an email saying it was at 5:30, so.
And my email said 5:30.
And your email said 5:30. So we sent him 2 emails that said 5:30.
Try again.
So let me talk to the school superintendent if he thinks, I mean, do you folks think an hour is adequate?
No, you're talking about next Tuesday or?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday,
Okay,
April
we-
16th.
A week from today.
Correct.
Now, that
We
is
have a regular council meeting.
that is a
that
regular
night.
council meeting at the moment. There does not look to be a huge number of items on that agenda. So if we started at 6 and ran late, we probably wouldn't be a big issue. But you have a preference? Does anybody really care?
I just sat through it all. I have no,
I mean, you
I
know,
don't need the presentation.
yeah.
I mean, we could certainly start at 6, and if we needed more time, run past the 7 o'clock start time on the council meeting. The only issue that's on the council meeting that might have any interest to the public is the second reading of the rezoning on Avon Street. And we did not get as big a turnout from the public at last meeting as I thought we would have. So I don't know if there'll be a bigger turnout, or if we'll see the same people, or if we won't see anyone on that issue. A lot of times when you approve something on first reading, they just kind of assume it's going to be done, so.
So I'm okay with starting at 6, if others are okay with starting at 6.
Okay.
Okay.
And I just want to reiterate what Ed said, that, you know, folks should come to that meeting based upon the information you're going to send us with the additions, prepared to ask questions about things that they have questions about, and to give a sense of where they are on that school committee budget.
Yes, I think it's very helpful for the school committee to get some feedback. You know, they're basically talking, if everything was funded, 15 cents?
I think so.
Heather says 15, the school department sometimes comes up with a slightly different number. I think
Yes.
Mike made a rough estimate of 16,
Yes,
but it's
I think
roughly
Bill
in the
said
15, 16 cent range
yeah.
those additional funds, or additional items would result in.
I just want to be clear that this is our opportunity to provide them feedback on,
Yes, because if you put it off too late, it makes it difficult to
Do the ballot.
get everything, because by the time we get to the election, they really have to have the details of where all of the money is going by warrant article. So, you know, if we cut, just say you cut $100,000 off of their request, they then have to go back and work through the school committee process to identify where that $100,000 is going to come from. Because at the polls, even though the question says, do you approve the school budget? At the polls, they have to post the detailed warrant articles. And I think there are 15 of them, 18 of them, 239 of them.
There's in the teens.
There's a lot of them. The state makes it very complicated by breaking things out by cost center.
good.
So the other thing is, if there are any other questions other than passing out this information, I think we've been pretty much keeping up with the items on the list. So this sheet is probably the biggest one. We will come back with some of the tax rates and so forth. But if there's any other items that you think it would be helpful during those general budget discussions, please feel free to email me and we can start circulating additional information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Great.